All right, well, welcome everybody. Our next installment of the 10X Speaker Series. My name is Brandon Cardwell. I run an organization called iGate. It's a nonprofit organization. It's focused on building a thriving startup community in the Tri-Valley. We run an incubator in downtown Livermore, just opened a new space. If any of you would like to come by and check it out, we'd love to have you. This particular speaker series, which we call Next Tech, is really focused on identifying the companies, the individual innovators, the entrepreneurs who are building innovation communities outside of the Silicon Valley. So we're really excited to have Serge here tonight. And I'll turn it over to Yolanda, my co-organizer for this event, for some introductions. Actually, real quick, is Don here? Don's here. Okay, Vice Mayor of Dublin, Don Bill's going to come up and do a quick welcome for us before we get in there. Come on, Don. Come on. You can't have a vice mayor in the house and not have a welcome. Yeah. There you go.
I just appreciate you being here, and we're glad we could host something like this. We've had other successful events, so they're very rewarding, and I'm glad that I can be here and listen again.
All right. Thank you. The City of Dublin is one of the sponsors of iGate. We're a nonprofit organization, so we definitely appreciate and count on the contributions of the City of Dublin to be able to put on these types of events for you all. So, Yolanda.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Vice Mayor, for having us here. It's great to have a space like this. I have to say, one of the things we struggle with is finding space, so we really appreciate it. So welcome, everyone. If you are an East Bay Bio Network returning networkee, welcome back. If you are new to the East Bay Bio Network or have never heard of the East Bay Bio Network, welcome. Really glad to see you. What the East Bay Bio Network does is something that myself and my co-organizers, Tim Meehan and Miraj, put together because simply we live in the East Bay. We work, at least two of us work in the East Bay, and we got really, really tired of having to drive to South San Francisco and Sunnyvale for every bio networking event. So we figured that there was enough of us that we could start having some events in the East Bay. And so thankfully we've been able to partner with iGate, with the City of Pleasanton, with the City of Dublin, to highlight some of the innovators in the Tri-Valley in particular. And so with that, I'd like to welcome all of you and then introduce a little bit about our format and our speakers. So the way we do this is basically, it's a little bit like an interview and a little bit like audience participation. So Don Arnold is a local entrepreneur. He's right here to my immediate left. And Don is a Livermore resident. He used to work at San Diego National Labs. I know quite a few of you are from there. He is also from San Diego, and he went on to found a company called Exigent Technologies. From Exigent, they had a successful exit and were acquired by Danaher. He most recently has started a new venture called Verisod LLC, and again, working in the area of biotech, working closely with startups and small biotech businesses who are trying to grow. And then what he's going to be doing is highlighting some of what Serge Saxonov has accomplished. He is currently serving as CEO at the company he co-founded, 10X Genomics, here in Pleasanton. Prior to that, he was VP of QuantaLife, VP of application development at QuantaLife, which was also here in Pleasanton. QuantaLife has since been acquired by Bio-Rad and is still here in Pleasanton. So, and then prior to that, Serge was part of the founding team for 23andMe. And through their conversation, which is not based. So, it takes a whole day to grow a company. But the objective here is really through kind of a conversation, a somewhat structured conversation, to reveal a little bit about how to both grow a company and advance science at the same time. So, it's you guys.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thanks, Dawn, for the introduction. Thanks, everybody, for being here. As she said, we're going to do pretty much, I'll try to get things kicked off with a few questions and just to get the conversation going with Serge. That's just a, if you're familiar with 10X, it's just a fabulous story, and Serge's story is even more exciting, I think, in some ways. So hopefully we can bring that out tonight. We'll talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to start, we'll open it up for questions. And if it's like the other next X that I've attended, there's no shortage of questions. So then I just point fingers. So hopefully that'll be the case tonight. I think you'll see that the topic is exciting enough. So I think first thing probably to do is, instead of me talking, is let Serge kind of introduce himself and a bit of 10X Genomics for the folks who aren't familiar.
Right. Thanks, John. So my background, just a little, I guess I'll try to keep it short. I only have so much time. My background is in bioinformatics. I came out of grad school, and right out of grad school was started 23andMe, and 23andMe as a company, as was conceptualized, and it still is very much a data analysis informatics software company. Right? We stayed away from all physical kinds of things, and that experience was a lot of fun, and I can go into a lot of sort of detail around all the different aspects that made it fun. It was good. It was really rewarding. We're building something that had not been built before, but part of what I sort of kind of felt there is running up against the limits of the existing technology, because we're very much a software company that was relying on kind of vendors or genomic makers of genomic equipment to get us data, and it's always there's sort of this perverse kind of thing that I kept running into. The things that we most wanted to know about the genome were the things that we could not actually access using that technology. Back then it was microarrays from Illumina, and nowadays it's sort of the short read sequencing from Illumina still. So that was sort of the setup for me to kind of move a bit upstream, where again, 23andMe was all sort of about data analysis, and you kind of bump up against the limits, and you want to go into actually start producing data, like go to the place where you can make data, make change, actually advance that part of the world. And I was recruited by a really close friend of mine who was a co-founder at QuantaLife, this company, fairly early on, right around the time when the technology kind of started coming together, and they needed someone to build applications on top of the technology. It was a really cool kind of idea there, and it was really to build, the goal there was to build the world's most precise DNA counter using this, droplets. It's called digital PCR. So I came in, we built out sort of the team, and in many ways it was a very kind of invigorating experience. Again, you go from a company that was very much focused on one thing, one kind of area. QuantaLife was much more, was a different side of the world, right? It was focused on atoms, reagents, like physical things, as opposed to software and such. And it was an awesome experience. We built a product and started selling it, and a larger company came in and purchased us. We stayed, all the execs of QuantaLife stayed there for, I think, up to 9 months, but one by one, sort of. And then, there's sort of various reasons for that, but fundamentally it was kind of different imperatives, right? Large company like Bio-Rad, it wasn't so much about innovation and pushing things forward. They had really great strength in terms of manufacturing and scale, which was a really nice complement to QuantaLife, but it wasn't the kind of thing that we were like really excited to be doing. And so we left, and then after some time, a couple of us got together to kind of work on a new project. And mainly the impetus initially was we liked working together. Like that was it. Like it was just really fun. And my co-founder Ben Heinzen is a chemist, and so we have very different backgrounds. But there was one thing that we kind of felt viscerally at QuantaLife is that it was like incredibly productive to be working together. And if you can just communicate well enough, you can actually do things like at a speed that's just awesome, right? And so we wanted to kind of replicate that experience, and that was the impetus. And then shortly thereafter, Kevin Ness, who was the person who recruited me into QuantaLife, joined us as the third founder of 10X, and he formed kind of the third leg of the stool. His background is microfluidics, mechanical engineering. Sort of the problems that we started thinking about were really motivated by my experience before at 23andMe, which is sort of addressing these big fundamental gaps that we saw existed in existing technology. Like you could not some, like, people talk about sequencing genomes, but really we're getting a very fragmentary picture of what's there. And we kind of saw that, there's like these fundamental gaps in the sequencing technology, and we wanted to address them, but without building the sequencer. So we had a set of rules. One of those, not building a sequencer. For context, for those who don't know, there's probably, at any given time, there's probably 100 startups out there trying to build a new sequencer, which is great. But, yeah. We saw, and then kind of as we kind of started out 10X, initially, it was sort of a project, we had a big goal, but as we attracted sort of people into the mix, and really great people, and thought more about the technology and what kinds of things we needed to build to actually get this product to work, realized there was something that was more fundamental, pretty fundamental, pretty general. And the ambition set of the company grew. Kind of we started imagining that there's something, and I always wanted to build something really tremendous and something really impactful, and kind of started realizing this could be it. And so I think that has been one of the sort of themes throughout 10X, is sort of the increase in ambition as we scale through all the different phases. The platform, the first, and then we kind of went through standard startup things. You raise some seed money, calling up friends and previous investors, raise a Series A about a year later, and then Series B, Series C. So, at this point we've raised over $160 million. So one of the things about this industry in general, when you're building hardware, especially like a very multidisciplinary kind of thing, is that it takes a lot of capital, oftentimes a lot of capital early. But we were fortunate to do that and to kind of go through all these phases. We went commercial in 2015. Up until that point, the company was very much R&D focused, like 99%. We started selling our first product about 2 weeks after we hired our first salesperson. So it gives you a little bit of kind of the sense of priorities. And I think it was about last year when we really started hitting our sort of commercial stride, where things started going really, really well. And this year has been sort of bonkers on the commercial side. And our team has really grown tremendously since that point. I think, to kind of fast forward, and, there's been a lot of, it's all kind of, sometimes it looks like a straight line from afar. It hasn't been, right? There's a lot of bumps along the way, a lot of problems you have to overcome, a lot of things but it's been a lot of fun, and, kind of, at this point, the conception of the company, we've built this tremendous team and technology elements, and really our motivation is to go after the big fundamentals problems of biology. And so we went after this idea of like getting the full genome, and the product is out there now, has been in sort of multiple iterations. The second product line that we launched was last year. It was around single-cell genomics, and that's kind of, it's essentially I would say, problem that has existed for about 50 years since we started measuring gene expression. We've been measuring it by taking a sample and kind of mixing the contents of all the cells together, and really the right way to do is to do every cell individually. And so that product has been tremendous and sort of just like enabling all kinds of things that people could not do before. And then recently this year, we kind of launched a new product line with several products around immunology, and really being able to see the immune repertoire in its entire sort of precision for every sample, T cells and B cells and such. And so that's sort of our guiding star, right? Like you kind of identify what are the big fundamental problems that need addressing in biology, and we build products to address them. Let's see. So that's kind of a short version of it. Maybe you can kind of.
Yeah. So I think you can kind of see it's a great success story that has kept pretty well under the covers in the early days until the product started coming out. And you can see this, from Serge's perspective, coming around from being a mathematician, picking up biology, and then jumping into 23andMe, where he put those algorithms in place. Got some hardware chaps with QuantaLife, and then moved over to tie everything back together with chemistry and algorithms again, but in a different role, right? So it's really evolved over time as far as your role as well, right? So you kind of see good summary of the story there. Now, with where 10X is now, it sounds like there's a lot of you've got a platform technology. It's built around the great team that's brought together a lot of disciplines. But it sounds like you're going after some very different spaces in terms of the science and the customer base. What does that do in terms of putting together challenges for the company at this stage of the growth? We'll go back a little bit farther now, but it's good time to kind of follow up on that right there, I think.
Yeah, so I think that is kind of one of those, I would say, central tensions in a company, especially for us, because usually, typically a company, by the time it gets to have sort of multiple product lines, it's larger than we are, because we're still relatively new, right? Yeah, it's a continuous sort of balance, right? Because you want to be, we've got sort of multiple children now, right? And we want to be paying attention to all of them, but we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to keep doing that. And so it is a lot of, sort of trade-offs, and you want to make sure you're putting your resources, especially, let's say, on the marketing side, the product is out there, you need to be supporting customers, you need to be kind of, promoting it. On the R&D side, it also, we've oftentimes had to face like very hard questions, limited resources, where you put the resources. And I think that's one of the things that we've done particularly well is saying, kind of focusing on the most important things as they come. And then one of the things that I also sort of, one of the other keys, right, to building a successful company, you always want to have sort of plan A and plan B and plan C in place for whatever you're working on. And so like one of the mantras of startups, right, is like, you got to focus, like it's really, really important. But then sort of the countervailing argument, you also need to have backup plans along the way. And I think that's one of the things that made us particularly successful is having that. And occasionally it requires some defocusing. So I do think it is very much a strain on the company. It's one of the things that has been difficult, is getting less difficult just by virtue of our growth. And that's sort of the number one focus for me and for us is growth. Growth on the R&D side and on the commercial side. If we could double the company tomorrow in size, I would do that, right? But it's all about hiring great people.
So you said you had first sales guy 2 years ago, right? So so that was 95%. How big was the company at that point? Just to clear, you started 2012, as I recall, right?
2012, yeah, so kind of the scale, let's see if I can remember. So 2012, 3 people, right? We hired, end of the year, 7 people. Roughly 20 the year after. By the time the launch were about, I would say, I want to say 80 people or so.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like
One sales team.
Yeah, a couple marketing guys, so that.
Okay.
Maybe 80 is a bit of an overestimate, but somewhere thereabouts. We're much more balanced now.
Wait, how big and what's the breakdown within, or how's it changed over the past 2 years?
Yeah, so the commercial team has grown a lot, right? So we're about, I guess, about a third is the commercial team, and that includes sales, marketing, and customer success. I would say the R&D team is a bit more, maybe like 40%, and then the rest is split between manufacturing and G&A and those kinds of functions.
It also sounds like with going into those different spaces, because I know you had a big role of online applications. I mean, that's challenging to try to build teams with whole different sets of expertise, right? So how is that then to find people to bring in to take on these different roles at a time or so quickly?
Well, yeah, so that was sort of, I would say, if you kind of ask me, like, what is the core of the core source of our success at 10X is really, it's the people, and the core sort of the founding is that having a multidisciplinary mindset of solving problems. That was, that's very core to the founding, to the philosophy of the team. And so from the beginning, that was our number one focus, right, is hiring the very best people in multiple disciplines. Initially, very much technical disciplines, but as we expanded, we're also kind of trying to expand that mindset to other functions, like business, like legal, finance, or commercial. It has been, so my experience, I came from very much an R&D side of things, and started out, having not done this, before, and it was a kind of an interesting experience. Wasn't too much of an issue early on because again, the company was very much an R&D organization. But as we scaled, yeah, for sure. I personally had to kind of expand my scope a great deal and kind of figure out like how do you actually build out commercial and how do you run it. And for a time there, I actually had to run sales, right? And that was interesting. And all those kinds. And that's kind of, I guess that's the sort of the CEO job, right? Like whenever there's calls, you have to kind of sit down and actually do all those things. And having not done that before, you have like a continuous learning curve and cycle of sort of this hyper learning. But it's also a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of stress, but it's a lot of fun. And I think the main thing, again, sort of coming back to the same lesson, like hiring great people, that's the way to get through all those problems. And so I'm sure just figuring out who's a great person in an area that you've never done before. And there you go. With executives, you start getting kind of a sense of that, and also what people you want to hire is like smarts, drive, passion for what you do, and you want to get for some people with real integrity. I would say those are the three things.
So that's a really different, the 10X is a really different experience than from what you've done at the prior companies, right? So 23andMe was over on the peninsula. You kind of went directly, you said you went directly out of a postdoc into what would, by any stretch, be characterized as a well-funded startup, right? It's so they had tons of cash, and then you went through back into the kind of the normal startup mode afterwards, right? So I mean, maybe share a little bit about the jumping from a postdoc into 23andMe and what that was like.
That was fun. So it was actually it was grad school. I didn't do postdoc. I wasn't directly, but it was it was interesting, right? Because 23andMe is sort of the founding. For those who don't know, there's we had very close connections to Google, and the time Anna Wojcicki, who's one of the founders, was at the time she was dating Sergey Brin, but she was later she got married to Sergey Brin. But also we had just her sisters, part of the early Google sort of circle, and there was sort of kind of the idea. And part of the reason we did, so it was my lab and I joined 23andMe together. We were going to start a company that was going to do essentially the same exact thing we kind of ran into. And a couple of other people, and it was sort of, we could see that there was a scale that could be built there that was really exciting. And sort of the resources that were available were pretty mind-bending. And so some of those early experiences was pretty funny. It was like, a couple of months after we started, we went and had a meeting at Genentech with Art Levinson, the CEO, and his executive staff, talking about, hey, we have this thing, hey, look at our, prototype software package, and I thought that was just normal, right? Like, I'm out of Tesla, I guess that's what the world is like. You go and meet Art Levinson, and you chat with his executive staff and ask their opinion on things, and they take you seriously, right? And then there's kind of those kinds of experiences we had. So I was telling John at some point, I mentioned to him, this was around the time when Word was about to come out, the movie, Sacha Baron Cohen, and somehow it came out that but it was really funny. And then a few weeks later, she just turns to me and is like, hey, would you be interested in going to see Word? I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, we can go to the premiere in LA. And so actually got in the chat and flew down and walked into the mirror right behind Ben Stiller and a bunch of us, and it was just like, and that was sort of like how things go, right? Eventually you kind of like, actually, no, that's not what like the world is like. But it was fun. It was definitely actually like lots of access to resources, and but ultimately it still kind of requires. A few things. I want to say that it wasn't ultimately the reason that 23andMe is where it is now. Is still like I'll give a lot of credit to Aaron and for the perseverance and just kind of driving through and making things happen, having that vision from the beginning and never kind of wavering from it. It sure helped to have essentially arbitrary access to resources, but I don't think that's sort of the core of the success of the company. I give her a lot of credit. The one thing that also kind of maybe counterintuitively actually I think gave some trouble to the company is access to that capital, because it makes people complacent and defocused, right? And when you are a startup and you're facing sort of death quarter by quarter, it tends to focus you. And so, so that's one of the things that definitely is true. Like the one of the things that I obsess about and scares me is getting complacent, right? Because I see that with large companies. I see that. I often think the difference, between startups and large companies is not that like you become large and that just by definition you become bad. It's like people tend to become complacent, right? And that's something that I'm trying to kind of keep at 10X as we scale, to kind of not lose that sense of urgency and keep moving fast and keep trying to make this happen, because I fundamentally believe that the world needs new technology and the world needs the kinds of things that we're building.
So it's a nice lead in to think about the transition you guys made out of QuantaLife in a sense, right? Because in a sense, the acquisition of QuantaLife into Bio-Rad, people saw the vision, they saw the technology. You guys have built some great devices, and applications were there for digital PCR. But the environment clearly wasn't something that the team was used to working with, and trying to find that energy that comes along with a startup. I 100% agree. You know, you get into that's the best place to be. You know, for my personal, you know, it's just we talked about it. I was learning enough, and I stuck with the company to learn different branches of how to run companies, and that was good. But once it was done, it's like, well, okay, it's good, right? So, you know, but in your case, it was a bit of a tricky transition back in. You guys actually ended up moving back into the space that QuantaLife had occupied previously. So I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience that are here that, you know, advice on leaving and you know, sticky issues you may have come into around that, or you know, motivations behind it, something like that. Might be interesting to follow.
Yeah.
Big company, small company.
Yeah, I mean, so big company, small company. I mean, so the thing specifically about Bio-Rad, it was clear, I mean, they made it very clear, they bought the product. We had the product and the digital PCR product, and there was, you know, lots of things you could do, but in terms of like my personal decision there, was like, well, the marginal value, what I could add there is, you know, I could certainly add things, but relative to other people who could do the job arguably as well, so I didn't feel necessarily there was that much. The company is organized, and you know, you can sort of optimize companies for different things. Bio-Rad is to sort of minimize risk and minimize variance and kind of keep growing steadily year by year, with having like a huge number of products that sort of incrementally, you know, kind of increase, I guess, in share and such. You know, whereas what motivates us and most startup people is fast growth, impact, right? Like making big changes happen. So there's sort of the, I think, just philosophically, there's that incompatibility, and it's not bad. It's just like there's different ways to optimize the company, right? Yeah, I think so. That was part of the departure. You know, when you do they do interesting things, right? So there's a learning. I don't know if this is what you're getting into. Like a learning here is like once you become successful, you should expect that there's going to be people who will feel greedy about the success, and so you know those who follow the story that we are, and you know, in disputes, let's say, with Bio-Rad, and so. I guess there's not a whole lot of advice I can give on that except, you know, be like anticipated. It's going to happen. It sort of doesn't matter. Almost doesn't matter what you do if you are successful. Our space is such that you will end up most likely in a bunch of disputes, and this is kind of the price you pay for it. And to some extent, that's part of it is that you just need to raise more capital in order to fight those battles as well.
Yeah, that's kind of the trick there. So I think, see, a couple more questions and we'll turn it over. We'll start gearing things up there. One of the nice things about, you know, your transition over to QuantaLife and 10X from 23andMe is that you also have experience both being on the peninsula and being here in the East Bay. And one of the key things around, you know, this next series is really to look at the evolution of technology beyond the Silicon Valley region, right? And so it's kind of, you know, any commentary around what you see are the differences between, you know, Peninsula versus the Pleasanton, you know, the Tri-Valley area here with Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore, and then I'll tie it with the second question, so I don't have to come back to it, is that I know you're also manufacturing as well. Maybe comment a little bit on how that being here has affected your decision around that part of the company.
Yeah. So the key difference, right, between say the peninsula and East Bay is like the difference in real estate prices. So it's pretty dramatic, right? And then, you know, kind of looking at our when we were first starting up the company, we actually gave it a pretty good sort of shot, looking all around the Bay Area, considering all the possibilities. We considered moving to you know, the city, San Francisco, Peninsula, and ultimately kind of ended up settling back to Pleasanton, which is where QuantaLife was, as Don mentioned. You know, through some amount of happenstance, we actually ended up getting back into the old QuantaLife building, which I can go into detail if anyone cares. But yeah, I mean, so the interesting thing here is like the rent, especially early on when you're starting up the company, that's hugely important. And when you have something like our company, where you have a lot of different needs, lab space and such, rent becomes important, and so it being affordable here is important. The other aspect which people underappreciate is that this is reverse commute for all the people who live on the peninsula, San Francisco, San Jose. So we actually get people from just about everywhere, right? We have people from San Jose, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley. I live in Oakland. Santa Cruz, Stockton, Tracy. I think Davis, maybe, I'm trying to remember. So in that sense, it actually kind of, it works out pretty well. We also, the other thing that's been interesting is like when people move from out of state into here, they can actually afford to buy a house around here in Pleasanton, as opposed to if we were in Palo Alto or something. So that has worked out well. I mean, there's definitely some challenges, like especially with software. So huge part of our product is software and computational biology. Many ways that's sort of the core, and and so getting people from San Francisco who have a lot of other options and for whom sort of the natural place to work is like a Google or or Facebook. That's where we face the biggest challenges. I think ultimately they'll be addressable, but on balance, I think we've done the right thing.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's open it up now. We get time for plenty of questions here. Yeah.
My name is Ravi. That's okay. I think.
Okay, here.